of Santiago. She has such wonderful information to share with us about the culture and history of Spain and of Santiago in particular. And so with that, Lynn, we will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad you're all here tonight. And I'd like to start off simply by thinking about, if you've walked the Camino, you know that as you're getting close to Santiago, you're waiting. You can't wait to get into the city, and you get into Santiago and you go get your Compostela, and then you go to the cathedral, and hopefully you get to see the Botafumeiro at one of the masses, and then poof, you're all gone. You either are flying home or you're walking on out to Finisterre. And I would like to encourage you to build in a day or two to stay in Santiago because it's such a wonderful city. So I'd like to share some of the information that I have about the city. I'm going to start off, if I can get this to go forward. It was working. Sorry, we're having technical issues all around here today. This hasn't ever happened. There we go. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about the etymology of the name of Santiago de Compostela. And we know that Santiago is from St. James, but the Compostela is what, there's always lots of different ideas about it. A lot of people say, oh, it means the field of stars, which sounds really good, Compostelae. But if you know medieval linguistics, historical linguistics, it cannot arrive at Compostela from Compostellae, although it sounds really good. And the idea is that it probably comes from the Latin compositum, which means cemetery. We know that the cathedral is built on an old Roman graveyard. And another theory is that it comes from the local vulgar Latin of composita tella, which also means burying ground. And if you've been in the cathedral when they were actually offering tours of the cathedral excavations, you can see that, yes, indeed, there was a graveyard underneath the cathedral. They've excavated these different tombs and they have found bodies. And most interestingly, when they were doing these excavations, they found the tomb of the Bishop Teodomiro, who was the bishop that proclaimed that the body that was found belonged to St. James. And in the cathedral, you can find the top covering to the sarcophagus there, and has a translation from the Latin script to what it actually means. So they've had this since 1955. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of the city. When the body was proclaimed to be the body of St. James, of course, they immediately built a chapel on the site. And these maps come from an exposition that was in the Pilgrimage Museum about 10 years ago. And so this is the first, what they envisioned was the first city. And what I think is interesting is that the wall around the city, it looks like an old wooden stockade. And within a few years, the number of pilgrims arriving made it too small, made the church too small. So a larger church was built, and you can see it's just not that many years later, we now have a stone wall surrounding the city with the church there in the center. This was a church that was destroyed by the marauding Arabs in 997, and after that church was destroyed, they didn't destroy the tomb of St. James, but the rest of the city was pretty much destroyed. The bells from the cathedral had to be carried back to Cordoba by Christian prisoners. And so in 1075, construction began on the new cathedral, and you can see it's a much larger city than it originally was. And the church was consecrated in 1211. The church that you see there in the picture, in the drawing, that is the inside of the church is what we see when we're there today, but lots of different styles of architecture have been added on the different sides of the church. So it really only preserves one actual entryway that is of the original architectural style. As you can see, obviously the city would have had gates to enter in the city. And this is the entry. If you were walking on the French road, and you can see on this wall there, the sign, it says Porta do Camino, means the gate of the Camino. And there would have been originally been a gate here where you would have entered. If you were coming in on the Camino Inglés, you would come in the Porta da Pena. It's now just been turned into a street, Rua da Porta da Peña. And what's interesting is right there, you can still see part of the old original wall. That's the Church of San Francisco that you can see down at the end of the street. So that clearly there was a gate into the city here at this wall. Now, if you're coming into Santiago on the Camino Portugués, you come through the Porta Facheira. It's a little hard to get a picture of it. Again, it's only exists now as a street name. But all of those umbrellas and other kinds of canvas covering the sidewalk cafes, but there you can see that it has retained the name. However, if you're coming in from Orense, you actually can still go through one of the only existing city gate, and this is the Porta da Massarelos. And so this comes in near the Mercado de Abastos. So if you're looking for a real door, this is what's left. And it's very interesting because trucks and cars do come in and out this way. So you have to be a little careful when you walk through there. Now, I remember seeing this arch, and you can see that there is that sculpture there on the arch. And when I first saw it, I thought, wow, that's a really nice lives there. Maybe that was a medieval equivalent of one of those plaques that you can buy while you're in Santiago. Here lives a pilgrim. But I was talking to George Greenia about this, and he pointed out that it's a much more interesting story than just there's a pilgrim who lives here. And this is because this is considered a property mark, marca de propiedad. And so when Santiago was being built, to build in stone costs a lot of money. And people didn't have the money to build with stone. And so buildings were constructed by ecclesiastical organizations. And so they would then lease them to a tenant. The tenant might sublease part of the building to another tenant. And so they started marking the buildings with a sign that indicated who the building belonged to. They date from the 16th to the 18th centuries. This is unique to Santiago. You don't find this anywhere else. At one point, they think perhaps there were as many as 800 of these marks. Unfortunately, today, because of buildings being torn down, whatever, there are about 200, 250 that still can be seen. So if you're walking around town and you see some of these indications I'm going to show you in just a minute, you'll know that's what they're there for. The buildings that are marked with a shell, and you can see a number of them here, indicate that they belong to the cabildo, or the governing body of the cathedral. And if you've stayed out at the albergue at the Seminario Menor, I thought it was very interesting. As you walk up that steep hill, there are a whole series. You can see this picture here on the right-hand side, the bottom right. They've turned this into a park, I think, but these used to be homes that people would have rented from the cathedral, and now all that's left is the shell over the doorway. There's no building left at all. San Martin Pinario also helped construct these buildings, and they are marked with obviously a pine tree, Pinario coming from pine, or some sort of a tree-like construction. and then the S and the M for San Martin. The city of Santiago, the governing body of the city, also built buildings, and they used a chalice and a host as the indication that these were their buildings. The University of Santiago also had some of these buildings, and they are always marked with the 5 stars, as you can see. And the Hospital Real, which is now the Parador, had this cross that indicates that it was their property. And you can see that if you stay in the Parador, you will see that the picture in the center is from the Parador. You see that the design is maintained in the windows as well as above the doorway. And the Brotherhood of the Santo Espiritu, the Holy Spirit, had this very curious looking chicken to mark their buildings. And again, you find them in all sorts of different parts of the city of Santiago. Now, the unfortunate thing is many of these have been mutilated, and they've either covered them up or they have put things over them. You can see a lot of these different mutilations. In the center, the upper center picture, that was originally a stone that marked a building by San Martin Pinario, but it's been taken down from wherever it originally was and has been placed back in another building upside down. So, you know, this is it's a part of the historical patrimony of the city, and it's, you know, such a shame that it is being lost. There's a group of people that is really interested in maintaining these, and they publish these maps. You can go to this URL, and they will tell you where you can find the buildings that are marked with whatever symbol, if you're looking for the cathedral symbol or the San Martin Pinario symbol. But each one of those has, as you can see, these little indications of where they are throughout the city. And as you can see, they're in lots of different places. So now I'd like to take you for a little walk around the cathedral and then around the historic part of the city, and then a little bit out of the city, because I just think there's so many exciting things to see. This is the entryway to the cathedral. This is the only entrance that maintains its Romanesque entry, which are the semicircular arches. So I always like looking at the different sculptures that are on this entryway. And this one I always enjoy pointing out. This is the sculpture of the adulteress. And she was condemned to kiss the skull of her paramour every day. And so she's shown on the front of the door there as a reminder to the people that this is what happens to you if you misbehave. And this is in the center of those two. You have the two semicircular arches. This is in the center of the two, and you can see you have kind of sort of lion-like figures, and behind them you have a sculpture which is called a crismon. It has the chi in the row for Jesus, and normally what you have are the symbols of the Alpha and the Omega. The Alpha is always on the left, the Omega is on the right, but you notice here that they are reversed. And a lot of people say that, oh, that's because it's symbolizing that it's the end of your Camino and the beginning of your new life following your pilgrimage. But I'm not sure that's exactly it, but it makes for a very good story. Now, if you walk around to the right at the right correct time, which is dark, you will find the Phantom Pilgrim. I'm sure some of you have already heard or seen pictures of the Phantom Pilgrim. This is it was not created. It's something that has come about because of the posts and the way the lights work. And so it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, you can wander around here and see the Phantom Pilgrim. But if you're very lucky, and of course this means you have to be in Santiago on a day when it's sunny, and we all know that that's not the most frequent. You can actually see another Phantom Pilgrim, but this is the daytime Phantom Pilgrim. You have to be at the same point, which is around to the right of the Platerias entrance, and you have to be there at the exact moment when the sun comes up over the building that's behind the cathedral. And for a brief moment, you will see another daytime pilgrim that appears, but she's harder to see. Now, if you were in Santiago last year, you would have been able to enter the cathedral. This is the holy door that is only open during holy years. And this is a picture from 2021 when I was there. And it was kind of an interesting experience because you could only enter here, and you also then had to exit through another door that I didn't even know existed, but you couldn't enter the main part of the cathedral. And what I really enjoyed about this is, and they obviously you can see they built a special walkway to get out. You can actually see what I call the Romanesque bones of the church. So much of it, the Romanesque part of the church, has been covered over by the Plateresque, the Baroque facade on the front, or a neoclassical classical style on the door opposite Platerias. So here you can actually see what a pilgrim in medieval times would actually have seen. One of the things that I enjoy seeing in the cathedral are these are stonemason marks. And you can see there's, on the left picture, there's a key, and in the center there's a star, and I'm not quite sure what you have there on the right. But when a stonemason carved a piece of stone, which obviously would have taken some time, in order to be paid, the stonemason had to mark that this was his stone. And so as you walk through the cathedral, depending on how the stones have been placed in the construction of the building, you will be able to see and pick out all of these different stonemason marks, which to me is very fascinating when you think about how much work it would have taken a stonemason to carve some of these stones in the construction of the cathedral. Okay, so let's walk back to the Platerias door, and standing at the Platerias door and you look out, you see this lovely square. This is where the fountain with the horses is. And straight ahead, you see this lovely building. And what's so interesting about this is that this is basically a false front. There were houses built there that were kind of ratty looking, old. And so the city fathers decided that it needed to look better. And so if you stand on the side, this is looking from the side, the building is about 9 feet wide. But it serves its purpose to be decorative when you stand at the cathedral and look out. They've put a kind of a museum in this building now, and there are times when you can go in and they have expositions. One time I was in there, there were photographs of the city and of the pilgrimage. I've been in there when there have been paintings, etc. It's free to enter, and it's very interesting to wander through these very narrow rooms. So that's something to do that's perhaps you wouldn't realize that there was an exposition space inside this building that was really just built to make the plaza pretty. So if you walk down the Rua do Bilar, you come to what is my favorite cafe in all of Spain, all of Santiago at least. And what's interesting is that it's called the Café Casino. And in the 19th century, lots of the Spanish cities had what they called a casino. And it was actually a private social club where the upper middle class families could get together and socialize with their friends. This one was founded in 1873. They had social events, dances. It was a place where they could go and have coffee, socialize with their friends. It's called a casino, not because there were gambling machines or it was a gambling place. There probably was gambling by the men in the back, but it was really just a social club. And in 2002, it closed and as a social club and has opened to the public as a cafe. And it is well worth just going inside because it is absolutely beautiful. Wood paneling, stained glass windows. It clearly was a very, very elegant place. And you can go in and sit, order a coffee, and watch the world pass by. It's a wonderful place. Okay, down maybe 8 or 10 buildings down, you come to this lovely narrow street. This is, a lot of people say it's the narrowest street in Santiago. It's actually the second narrowest by about 9 millimeters, but it's the one that's most easily accessible, and it's called Ruela, which is sort of alley de entre ruas, between streets, because this is a little shortcut that will get you from the Rua do Vilar up to Rua Nova, which is the next street up. You can see it's pretty narrow. And what I like about this place is as you walk up to the end of this little walkway, it opens into a tiny square where there is a restaurant. And this is the Bar Restaurante Entre Ruas. It is packed. Every time I've gone past there, if you want to eat there, you have to get there right as they open at 1:30 or come about 2 hours later to be able to get a table. They have tables set up outside. It's not fancy. The menu, there is no menu. The menu is posted on the wall, like you can see here. It's all in Galician. It's not in Spanish, but the food is good. It's just basic home cooking. There is a dining room downstairs, which I find a little claustrophobic. To get down there, you go down the steepest, narrowest stairway I've ever been on. But if the weather is nice, you can sit outside in the little square and watch the world go by, because it's used as a transit point from one street to the other. So after you've gone through the little square, it dog legs up and you end up on Rua Nova. And if you walk down a block or so, you will find the Church of Santa Maria Salome. It's the only church that I know of that is dedicated to the mother of St. James. And I like this church for one particular reason, which is pretty funny. It is because of this lovely altar that is in the church. And this is an altar to St. Andrew. You can tell that it's St. Andrew because of the X cross, which is how he was crucified. But if you look down at the base of those two columns, you have two angels who are wearing glasses. And why it's there, I don't know, but I find that very, very intriguing. Okay, so if you walk back toward the way you've come, you can you come into what's called the Plaza do Toral, and this is it's called the Paso, which the translation is manor house or palace, and it was obviously a very wealthy man's home. And you have up on the top Atlas holding up the world, quite an amazing sculpture there. And this plaza also occasionally will have, when they have musical performances or concerts or whatever, small concerts, they actually sometimes will use this square as a place where you can hear the music. And just down from that square is you come to the oldest pharmacy in Santiago. And it's founded in 1843. This building reminds me very much of the Cafe Casino, that same use of wood. They don't like you coming in and taking pictures, so I borrowed this from Flickr. Somebody obviously had taken this picture. As you can see, the amazing wood sculptures. And then, of course, the jars that would have held the different ingredients for the medicines that they were making. It's always worth going in and just buying a box of Band-Aids or something just to see it. It was really, really wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to walk outside of the historical center. If you've been in Santiago, you probably have seen these sculptures of these two ladies. They're called As Marias, or sometimes As Duas en Punto, which means at two on the dot. It's a very sad story, actually. They were part of a very large family. The brothers were very active in the anarchist movement in the early 30s in Santiago. And when the Spanish Civil War broke out in 1936, they knew that their lives were probably in danger, and they left town. And the sisters were left. And the fascists took out their anger at not being able to find the brothers on these sisters. There was the third one, but she died young, so that these two were left. And they, horrible things were done to them, which anyone who was on the wrong side, on both sides, I don't mean to say it was simply the fascists, but both sides mistreated people who were on their opposite political side. They would do things like parade them through the street, cut off their hair, make them drink castor oil. And basically, they probably were a little crazy. So they, in the 50s and 60s, they would come out every day at 2 o'clock, which is when the young men from the universities would be strolling the streets, and they would be dressed, as you can see, in very bright clothing. This is the time when you wouldn't wear clothing that was bright. You were wearing navy blue, black, gray, and so they stood out. And so this is this statue was set up probably in the early 90s, I believe, to honor them. They really represented a different point of view from the fascists who were in control of Santiago. And they've become kind of an icon of the city. In 2019, you can see we have a very modernized version of the two sisters. And then there was, on the other picture on the right-hand side, this was on one of the streets. It was just a painting, a mural that had been put up to cover a door. So they've become sort of a beloved symbol of the city in recent years. Now, if you continue on past the two sisters, you come to this very interesting sculpture of Ramón del Valle Inclán, who was a early 20th century writer, and he's he's a very extravagant looking figure, but people really enjoy coming and sitting with him, getting their picture taken with him. And if you have walked the Variante Espiritual, the city where you take the boat at the end of that path, this is on the Portuguese route, that was his hometown. And if you wander around town, they have a sculpture garden set up with all of the very strange characters that populate his works. He wrote plays, he wrote short stories, and he wrote novels. So it's always just worth walking by and checking him out. And then, of course, you get to the end of this. This is the Paseo de la Herradura. This is where you get your iconic picture of the city of Santiago, of the cathedral. It really is, it's a wonderful way to walk around the city and get a perspective. You're up above the city, and it really is worth taking the time to walk out there. Now, if you come back from that walkway, you come to this very interesting bench, and it's called the Whispering Bench. And if it curves around, so that you can see her on the left-hand side, it kind of curves around to the right. And young people discovered back when girls weren't allowed to go out and wander around by themselves, the young man could sit here on the left and whisper, and the sound would carry all the way around to the other side of the bench. And the young woman could hear whatever sweet nothings he wanted to whisper. We tried it. It actually does work. So pretty interesting. And then I'm a cat person. I really like cats. And so I was quite impressed with what Santiago does to protect the feral cats. And so this is says it's a feline colony. They have food for them. They get them fixed so they don't produce new babies. And they even have signs saying, let them cross the street. Deixaos cruzar. And I've seen these around the city. It's quite a few of them where they're placed near where there's several of these feline colonies around the city. Over on the right-hand side, you can see what they do. Once they have fixed the cat, they clip the ear so that they know which ones have been fixed and which ones haven't. So there's a real concern for these animals. Okay, we're heading back now towards the main square, the Obradoiro. And you may have seen this if you've been in Santiago, and I've heard two different stories. One, this lists all of the different kinds of careers you can study in the university, arts, letters, philosophy, whatever. And if you don't know what you want to study, you stand with your back to this and you reach behind you and point, and that will tell you what you're supposed to study. That's one story I heard. The other story was that that's what the girls do to figure out who it is that they're supposed to seek out as a partner. But either way, it gives you an idea that this is really a university city, and it has a lot of influence on how people live their lives. Less so in the summer when all the pilgrims are there, but during the academic year, it clearly is a university city. Now, nighttime entertainment. Boy, you can wander around. There are all sorts of things that you can see. This is what is called a and Tuna is a traditional music group. It was a kind of group that was founded back in the 16th, 17th century because these were supposedly hungry students. And as their symbol, they have a crossed soup spoon and a fork. You can see that in sometimes in their sort of in their costumes, at least, or pictures of it. Anyway, they get together every night around 10:30, and they will play an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, the kinds of music that is typically associated with these student groups. They're kind of folk songs. And of course, they've got their CDs for sale, and they also, of course, are passing the hat. But it's a very typical kind of group that you would find in a university city. And then this is the staircase where you walk down, if you've walked into Santiago on the Francés, where the bagpiper is always playing at night. I'm not sure how they end up deciding who gets to be where, but this was a tenor who was singing, and I saw him on numerous nights. So he obviously had a wonderful audience. He was a wonderful performer. He also has his CDs for sale, which I thought was kind of curious. And there's lots going on in the streets at night in Santiago. Now, every time I'm there, I find something new to do. And this was from 2 years ago. I found out about what were called game boards, tableros de juegos. And these were found in public spaces, in the squares, in doorways, stairways. They're from the 16th and 17th century, which is a time when economically things were quite bad in Spain. And the people who had no money would go sit outside the convents, the monasteries, the churches, waiting for alms to be distributed. And so they would construct what game works so that they could sit and play while they were waiting for the food to be distributed. Obviously, it was a form of entertainment. And again, just like the property marks, many are being destroyed. They're kind of hard to see, but these are some pictures of some of the ones that have been found. I've only been able to find a couple of them, but when I'm in Spain, when I'm in Santiago, I always go around looking to see if I can find them. But again, someone has identified where they are located. I haven't been back long enough to be able to seek some of these out, but I will be giving it a try the next time I'm there for an extended period of time. You can see here, and these show up pretty well, or a little somewhat, because it had rained and the holes, and this looks like it was a game like tic-tac-toe. There's rain in the hole, there's water in the holes, and so that you can see where they are. This is another one. You can see it on just below the chain there in the front. Again, you see that pattern of perhaps 9 holes. And it would have been, they would have probably had rocks to place them in the holes, sort of like we would do with X's and O's for tic-tac-toe. And the other thing that I find very interesting, you can see there's a chain. This is around the parador, and the chain marks that this is property of the king. So if you'd done something bad and the police were chasing you, if you could hop over this chain, they couldn't arrest you because you were on the king's property. Just like you can get sanctuary in a church. So that's why there's a chain around the parador. And this is, Johnny Walker Santiago just posted this a couple of weeks ago on a Facebook page. And this is a set of stairs. It's the Rua da Carriboca. If you're walking into Santiago, it's just before you get to the Porta do Caminho. It's a street that comes down. And the question was, what's their special connection to St. James? And there are 4 sections of stairs, and they are in the series of 6, 5, 6, 11. So those are the years, the spacing between the holy years, so that it's kind of like a holy year staircase. So I haven't seen it. I just used Johnny Walker's picture. But these are the quirky kinds of things that I enjoy finding in Santiago. But I'd also like to remind you, don't miss the museums. The museums are wonderful. If you take the roof tour, or you get the tour to the Portico de la Gloria, you also get entrance to the Cathedral Museum, and it's definitely worth spending some time there just to see all of the things that are worth seeing. I mean, it's amazing. There's also in the Plateria Square, there's the Museo das Peregrinaciones, has lots of information on the pilgrimage. And then if you have extra time, it's a little off the beaten track. It's not right in the center, but the Museo do Povo Galego, it's a museum that has all sorts of things related to the life in Galicia. And it's an old monastery, and they have used the rooms to display, I think, almost anything you could even imagine related to life in Galicia, including in one large room, they have several boats that have been brought to show how fishing was done in Galicia. So I would really, if you have the time, be sure to do some of these things to really get a sense of what Galicia is like. And with that, I'm happy to open to questions.
Fantastic. Lynn, would you mind going back to the slide that had the map, the link where the maps, so people could go and find some of the things that you talked about? It was kind of early in your talk. And while she does that, if y'all have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand using the chat feature to raise your hand, you are welcome to do that. And we will get started with questions, because this was a wonderful talk, Lynn. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome.
The first question said, wondering if there's any tours of the university.
I've not heard of any. The Spanish universities are different from American universities in that there usually is not a single campus. I think some of the more modern, they have built what they call the Southern Campus, I think. I haven't been out there, but I know that the history and geography is over by the Mercado de Abastos. But the administration building is right off the Obradoiro Square, and it's a very historic building, so it is worth just wandering in there to see what it's like. But I don't know of any specific tours to the university buildings.
Okay, thank you. Next question. You can put it in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute or raise your hand, whatever is best for you.
I'd like to quickly say thank you. It's been fun.
Good. I love Santiago. I studied 2 years in Madrid, and I used to think that Madrid was my favorite city in the world, and it's been replaced. It's now Santiago.
Oh, that's great.
Alison, there was somebody who put into the chat, they said this was a fantastic lecture. Please ask Lynn what inspired her to develop all this information.
I take student groups on the Camino, and if there sometimes it depends on the group, but I have occasionally taken them we would hike for 2 weeks, and then they would go to a language school in Santiago for 2 weeks. And so they would be in class in the mornings, and I would have to find something to do. So that's sort of where this all started. Just searching out things that are interesting about the city and asking questions. So that's basically how it got started.
That's great. Somebody put in the chat that there is a tour of the university library, so you might be able to check that out if you're in town.
Good.
And the next question is, do you have any recommendations for tours of the city?
No. I know that there are some of those free tours that you can meet. I've seen them in the I think in the Obradoiro Square, they have umbrellas or something, and you tip them basically, but they do walk you around the city and point out, I think, probably some of the same things that I've been talking about, because I've seen them in some of the same streets. So that certainly that might be one way to do it.
Great. Somebody asked, what was the name of the pharmacy that you mentioned again?
Oh, can we go forward and look? I don't remember what it's
Yes,
called.
that's fine.
Except now, I don't know, sometimes doesn't like me.
It didn't like me today either. I feel it.
I think it's Fonseca, but that's not, that isn't correct.
Viscana.
I on the sign that was kind of sticking out from the building, it said Farmacia R and then Point Vescana.
But yeah, that's right, Vescala. It was the name of the pharmacist. So yeah. Oh, there's moving now.
I hate to interrupt, but I just wanted to vouch for Dr. Talbot. I am one of her former students here and a member of the American Pilgrims on the Camino and the SoCo chapter in Colorado. So my love for the Camino started with Dr. Talbot many, many years ago.
Hello, Brittany.
Hey.
Thank you for sharing that, Brittany. That's great. Lynn, do you have any recommendations on where to stay overnight in Santiago?
Oh, there's only one place to stay. Well, no, there are two places to stay. If you have lots of money, you can stay at the Parador. And that would have been where you would have stayed if you were a poor pilgrim. I love the Hospederia San Martin Pinario. It's the biggest issue is just getting a room there. It's very, very popular. It is not fancy. The first 2 floors have been renovated. And so they are simple, but nicely renovated rooms, no telephones, no television. But up on the 4th floor is the pilgrim floor. And these were rooms that the seminarians used to live in. They have not been updated since, I would say, the 1950s. They're mostly single rooms. They're 25 euros a night. You get sheets on the bed, you get a fluffy towel and your own private bathroom that probably is the smallest bathroom you've ever seen, but everything works. And I love staying there. It's right across the street from the cathedral. But I'm taking a group, we're leaving on Monday for the Camino. I made my reservations back in November. You know, it's a large group, there are 12 of us. So, but you have to call them. You cannot make those reservations online. So that you email them or call them and make a reservation. And then sometimes you just walk in and they do have a room, but you can't count on it.
All right. And we have a couple people who are putting suggestions on where to stay in the chat, which is great. Somebody
Yes.
at Mary Jane Dunn suggested putting in a plug for visiting the Colejata de Santa Maria del Sar.
Yes. If Mary Jane's there, I have to give the shout out to Mary Jane. She's the one who taught me about the morning phantom pilgrim. And I remember that my picture was taken when we met there one sunny morning in Santiago. It was about 9:03 in the morning. So Mary Jane, thank you if you're there.
That's great. And then the last 2 questions that we have time for, any restaurants you would recommend? And what about the night tour of the cathedral?
Okay, I'm not a foodie, so I'm not the person to ask about restaurants. I eat to have energy. So I'm sure someone can put in the chat where they're great places to eat. I just eat because I get hungry. The nighttime tour of the cathedral was amazing. But there was a problem. The guide spoke only Spanish. And that made it hard for people who didn't speak Spanish. And that is the one issue that I do have with the tours at the cathedral, is that often the guides do not speak much English or any English. And that isn't a problem for me because I can understand them, but I can see how frustrating it would be for someone who didn't speak Spanish. But it was a wonderful tour. I'm glad I did it.
Someone put in here that Friday night tours are in English. So if you're in town, it
Good.
looks like that is an option. And thank you to those of you who have been adding information or answering questions in the chat. We really appreciate that, because everybody has lots of great experiences. And like Lynn, we were able to learn from her today, and we are so grateful for her time today. Again, we appreciate your patience and kindness as we got our technology figured out today. As we finish our time together, I want to say, I know many of you are probably going to walk, and so buen camino to all of you who are going to be walking, or if you're walking or waiting and planning and figuring all of that out, buen camino to y'all as well. If you are not, if you've not checked out our website, we have lots of great information about local chapters. We have great information about planning your Camino, about getting involved if you're wanting to volunteer. And so you can check us out at AmericanPilgrims.org. With that, I want to say that we have our next upcoming national event on Saturday, which is actor director Andrew McCarthy is going to be joining us about his upcoming memoir of walking the Camino, which is his second time to walk it, and he walked it with his son. So we hope that you are going to join us for that. And with that, I will say buen camino to everyone.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Thank
Lynn,
you.
we're getting lots of great feedback in the chat too, so thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm just running through the chat. I was just curious to see what people were saying.
Oh, yes.
Bon
Oh,
chemin.
yes. Jennifer, I'm going to email you if you're still on the call. I'm sorry, I'm going to put an email in the chat. You can email chapters at AmericanPilgrims.org, and we will answer your question about starting a local chapter. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you guys so much. Buen camino. Have a great evening, morning, night, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Bon chemin.
Bye, Brittany.
Thank you, Lynn.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yep, take care. Allison, need me to hit the button?
Okay.
Okay, I think Allison's gone, so. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Really
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
Take care. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.